Hello and welcome to this episode of the Queen Bee podcast. Today we are joined by both Natalie Moore and Lisa Saunders from Own Your Health Collective, and they are also co-hosts of the podcast Perimenopause Power. Both are accredited coaches with complementary skills and passions around health and well-being, with a particular focus on women transitioning through perimenopause. Thanks for joining us today, ladies.
Oh, you're so welcome. We're ecstatic to be here, aren't we, Nat?
We are, yes. And we just said we're all fired up on all cylinders to have a great conversation.
It's going to be a good one. So I thought we'd start off with why own your health and why menopause?
Yeah, good question and big question. And just to give some background, so Lisa and I were working in our own respective health coaching businesses, working predominantly with women. And we joined forces in 2019 to run a women's wellness expo in our local area. And we just wanted to bring women to some education, but also an understanding of holistic health services that are in the area. And we were blown away by the response that we had, that Lisa and I looked at each other and said, I think we need to formalize this and come together. And from the get-go, we were very much wanting to introduce that whole health element. So supporting women around physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, and then how that comes back to the self and where they are in their life. And we came up with the name Own Your Health because we wanted to help women to own their health. Make it really simple. Somewhere along the line, we've lost what health looks like and have probably made it very difficult given all the different fads and research and different things that have been coming out. But essentially, it's coming back to the basics, right? And that's where we wanted to make greatest impact. And it was 2020 when we formalized our business, but then the world changed and we were plunged into lockdown with everything going on. And we had our own personal experiences through hormonal challenges or particular phase of life that we were in. And I remember I was given the ring around in seeing different doctors and specialists and said to Lisa, if we're struggling to get the information, could you imagine the everyday woman who hasn't got the health background, what she might be struggling with in getting the information? And that's where we really delved into menstrual cycles, educating women about their bodies and their menstrual cycles. And then, of course, menopause kept coming up. And the more conversations we had, we realized that the simple information around what menopause is, the term perimenopause was very unknown. And this is going back only 4 years ago. Still is, yeah. So that was sort of the basis of us coming together and our passion with our work.
Yeah, great. And it's really interesting how even 4 years ago, it was still so unknown. Like, I'm relatively new in the space. Queen Bee only really came about at the start of this year. And yet the same sort of experience for me where I still didn't know what was going on. And I was doing the research. And again, I'm good at doing research. What about everyone who's not and they don't know how to start?
It's a similar theme. We did a podcast this morning where we interviewed a guest, and it's the same thing. The education's not there. We need to get it in at the secondary schools or even primary schools in the later years. And it's women having to just then go off their own bat and actually research it and understand what's going on. But they don't really start doing it until there are those what Nat and I call whispers that are coming along, and they're thinking, shit, what's going on here? And they're not getting a lot of advice from their doctors either. So, and as we keep saying, it's no fault by the doctors either, because they're not getting the education either. So there's no win-win situation here.
Yeah, and at the moment, as you say, they don't have any training in women's hormones. And what they get taught from the pharmaceutical companies is everything's based on a man's body. Like, a woman's version is just a small man. It's not the fact that we're this completely hormonal being that is quite different. Okay, so we often think about that physical and mental element of well-being, and even sometimes the emotional facets of our bodies. But can you tell us a bit more about bringing our spiritual selves into the mix and how they all interrelate?
Yes, great question. And actually, in the early days of our work, Lisa and I created a Venn diagram. So if you think about 4 circles, and in the middle is the self, and all of the circles around the self are interconnected, and it's made up of those 4 pillars: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And the reason we turned it into a Venn diagram was because it shows the connectedness of every single facet of us. So what we do in our physical health supports our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health, etc. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that we're one big moving part: mind, heart, and gut. And no matter what we do in our life, or what hat we wear, or what role we play, we are all so deeply connected. And really, from my perspective, given my yoga and meditation and mindfulness background, I really do feel that it's the spiritual health which propels us forward and is the basis behind everything that we are and everything that we do. And so when we talk about spiritual health, we talk about really connecting with who you are. So understanding your values, understanding your purpose, your passion, coming into your belief patterns, which connect to your thoughts, and that also connects to your feelings, which creates your actions as well. So it's really about coming back to the very core and essence of who you are. And just, when we talk about and support women around coming into their spiritual health, it's about taking a moment to just stop, feel, and be where you are, and ask yourself, are you living in alignment to how you want to live? Are you living by your values? Are your belief patterns your beliefs, or are they someone else's beliefs? And are you living with the sense of purpose and fulfillment that you're looking for as well? Which we know, when we look at women in their 40s and their 50s, this is a real opportune time that women are looking for that sense of fulfillment, that deeper sense of purpose and impact. And so connecting with our spiritual health is a really positive process during the phase of perimenopause.
And so I just wanted to say, Tanya, I don't think, what Nat's just described, I don't think it comes naturally to a lot of women to stop and actually acknowledge where they are spiritually, because I think there's a real element around it being woo-woo, and it's not woo-woo, because you actually, when you connect spiritually to what's actually happening to you and where you're at and all the feels, it can be such a great starting point in which to then launch to, how you're going to navigate this time of life.
And what might that sort of, it's easy for us to sort of say, okay, if I'm physically feeling unwell, I can identify that. How do we know when we're spiritually unwell? What are there signs that we can kind of identify, or is it more of a bigger picture?
I think, and I reflect on my experience, and a catalyst for me doing the work that I do was when I became a mum, and our listeners are synonymous with my story. But for me, it was really that loss of self, that loss of identity, that I remember having beautiful baby girl, but yearning for something. There was something within me that was just not being tapped into, or was just like there was an emptiness. And it wasn't an emptiness in that I was depressed or anxious. I knew that there was something, that I was yearning for something more. And, a lot of that comes from the fact that, you become a mum, all of a sudden, no one knows your name, or everyone forgets your name, your mum, everyone refers to you as mum. No one's really asking how you're feeling. It's about the baby, and of course, rightly so. But I just remember feeling that real loss of self and loss of identity. And for me, it was about, okay, I've got to tap into this feeling, because I can see that loss is creating me stress, making me feel overwhelmed. I'm not present. I'm constantly chasing for something. I remember just constantly looking for the next thing to try and fill that void that was within me. And we know that women during perimenopause can have that real loss of self and loss of identity, that loss of confidence. And again, it's about, where can you find some white space in your day to take a moment to stop and really ask yourself, how am I feeling? Really that was a big catalyst for me, was just saying, okay, this isn't normal. I can't keep living on this hamster wheel of stress and overwhelm. There's got to be something more here. And for me, it was going through that exploration and just learning about myself, reconnecting with myself, and eventually it came out, but it takes time.
And I think Natalie's story is something that a lot of women definitely go through and feel. And I think for my own element too, it's that change in phase from one phase of your life going into another. So, my kids are older, they're a lot more independent, and I'm coming back into the phase of me and my health changing. And that's quite spiritually invigorating, actually, because you're moving from something that you've been doing the last 20 odd years, and then you're going into a new phase. And it's not just the physical changes that you've probably got to relook at that, come naturally to a lot of us. There is that spiritual, there's that change in that mental load, definitely a change in your emotions, given, that roller coaster that our hormones are going through. So I think it really does come back to spiritually. I've got to just stop and reassess and see where I'm at this point and work out what's the best way forward.
Yeah. And I can really resonate with that experience with the baby as well, because I know when I had mine, I wanted to go back to work because I didn't know what to do. And it was like kind of community, I need someone to support me with this child. Whereas now that I'm older and I'm mostly through my reverse puberty experience of perimenopause, is I actually want to spend time with the girls, and because I feel more settled in myself and who I am. I'm not fighting that to the same degree. I definitely need to do more work. That's totally there. So what kind of things can we do to actually build our spiritual self?
Yeah, great question. And when you sort of make that decision that you want to find more alignment with who you are and how you want to live, and reconnect with yourself, as Lee spoke about, it's taking that very first step, and very simply, as I said before, just asking yourself, how am I feeling? And you could ask yourself just within your mind, but then also taking that a little bit further and introducing writing or journaling into your day as well. And perhaps taking a moment, picking up pen and paper. And there's a great quote, but I can't remember, but it talks about, writing the whispers of your heart. For a lot of us, it's very tricky to actually verbalize what it is that we're feeling or what it is that we want. And a lot of that comes from the fear of, imagine if I share that with someone, what are they going to think of me if I start saying I'm going to do this, or what will my family think? And these are words from women that we've heard that we speak with. But when you can write and journal, you are just there at one with yourself, your thoughts, your heart, and no one's there to judge. And you can just put it all out on paper. And for me, that was a big process or practice within my life that I started back around that time. So I could just envisage and connect and come back to myself. And a lot of it was really around that values piece. It was really around visioning what I want my life to look like, and how I want to be as a wife, as a friend, as a worker, etc. So that's a really great starting point. And then also the beauty of women's bodies and our cycles and our phases. And obviously I understand if you're coming into perimenopause, our cycles are a little bit more erratic, but we have beautiful times within our cycle that, is almost forcing us to rest. So think about our luteal phase, our early menstrual phase, and that is the best time to give ourselves permission to just stop and be, and just reflect and think. Yeah, in our busy existence, we're just on autopilot, going from one thing to the next constantly. And we're missing that opportunity to connect with ourselves and really feel into what it is that we need. And Lisa and I, through our podcast, often talk about there's an opportunity for us to come into our power during this phase of life, and we get to choose what this phase of life looks and feels like to us. And we just have to give ourselves that permission to just stop and breathe and be and connect.
Now, when you were talking that through about our cycle, it makes a really good point, how it is erratic during perimenopause. And it's even more important to be really in tune with the ups and downs of your body. You can go from having a cycle every 2 weeks to, some people say that 60 days from one to the next, right? And I think you've really got to be each day very much in touch with your body. And I think a lot of women are, but they put it to the side and say, no, I couldn't possibly be thinking like that or feeling like that, or my mood is low, and I'm just going to ignore it. And they continue just to try and push through. And so, our advice is always just take it in. They're the whispers or the feelings that you really should be taking note of. And if you've got an erratic cycle, it's up and down, well then, and you're feeling like that, that's your pointer to say, hey, today you need to take it easy. Go easy on yourself. And I'm sure you've got a family, a network, or whatever it looks like, of people that can pick up the slack, or just don't do what you were planning to do that day. There's always tomorrow. We're so good at saying, I've got to get through my list. I'm a big sucker for that. I've got a list. I have a list every day, right? And it's like, but now I'm really going, well, if I can't do it now, I'm going to just have to do it tomorrow, because I look back at what I've achieved for the day and it's like, yeah, I'm happy with that. So yeah, there's a lot of that inner critic and those voices in our head that are talking to us, and how we operated 10, 20, 30 years ago, we operate differently now. And that's something that women need to really understand, that spiritually they'll operate differently. They'll tweak things physically. There's a whole lot of tweaking that's got to be done. You don't have to relearn life, but you also need to be aware that the tweaking's there and it's to your benefit to lean into it and listen.
Yeah, and really, I guess, to show ourselves a bit of grace.
Absolutely.
Be your best friend.
Absolutely.
So, on behalf of any woman who has had to endure health and well-being challenges in the workplace, and I know this is a hot topic we were talking about before we started the podcast today, what are some of the things that we as women can do, and what are some of the things that our employers or colleagues can do to improve our workplace experience and also, therefore, our productivity and performance?
Yeah, and it's a big question, and there's still that mindset that is menopause really a workplace topic, but we know that it is, and we know, as I alluded to before, women in 40s and 50s, they're coming into that re-acceleration of their career, that self-actualization phase, and they're looking for work that actually fuels their soul and lifts their heart and gives them that sense of purpose. And we also know that prominent career time is intersected by the symptoms of perimenopause. And there's a great quote that we had from a guest on our podcast who said, for all that is seen, there is a lot that is not seen. And it's those psychological symptoms that have the biggest impact on how women show up in the workplace. And because we haven't had that education, or we don't have that knowledge that they are actually core symptoms of this phase of life, women think they're going crazy or something is seriously wrong with them. And so the first step is really that education and being an advocate for yourself. The opportunities for information are growing with your wonderful podcast and the work that you do, Tanya, and lots of other different resources. So find where you can get some knowledge and get some education. Where can you introduce this into your workplace, and speak to managers and say you want to bring this into the workplace to educate not just women but men as well, because everybody needs to know how this is going to impact women in the workplace, but not just women, similarly men as well. We know Dr. Louise Newson said 50% of the population will go through menopause. The other 50% of the population will know someone who is or is supporting someone who is. And so it's just not just as impactful, but there's that impact for a support person too, because all of a sudden someone that they love and care for is changing and they feel helpless in being able to help them as well. So it's really important, this education. And then one thing, and Lisa will probably share too, is that we're still not comfortable saying the word menopause out loud. We're still whispering it behind shielded hand. And that within the workplace goes a very long way to breaking down those silos and normalizing this phase of life. Lise, anything else from your point with the workplace?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with everything you said. It's the education and just talking about it. And I don't want to harp back on it, but, we were talking about this in the podcast we did this morning. We weren't talking about mental health. We weren't talking about parental leave. We weren't talking about LGBTIQ. You know, there's a whole lot of things that were disruptive years ago that people said, oh, no, we don't need to worry about. You've got to be kidding. We're not going to talk about that. Well, look where we are now. Call it what you want, but perhaps the menopause conversation is disrupting for some people. But if we don't talk about it, women, I don't care what anyone says, women are going through it. They're feeling the symptoms of it, and it is impacting something that they ideally want to do. You know, they're, like Nat said, they're accelerating their careers again. They're coming into it, and quite possibly they're not in a supportive environment where they feel like they can talk about it. But you know what? Men can bring up a whole lot of stuff that they want to talk about. No one butters an eyelid, right? And we can talk about mental health now. And you know, there's so much being talked about in that arena. And 10 years ago, we weren't doing that. So I just think that we need to give women the ability and confidence to say, hey, I'm not feeling great. I still want to do my job. I'm just having a shitty day. Just like, if we don't go to work, if we've got, some cold symptoms or the flu, we're not sick, obviously, but it's just, pointing that the same thing can happen with menopause and how women are feeling. Considering it's something that can, be perimenopause can start, 8-10 years before women go into menopause. It's a long time to not be able to talk about it and not feel like that you've got the support to be able to bring it up and say, I'm just having a shitty day, I've got a bit of brain fog or whatever. We should be able to speak up and say how we're feeling.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the new laws around psychological safety in the workplace actually intersect with that, because if we're not able to have those conversations, if we're not able to have a work environment where we can take a rest if we really need a rest, or if our brain's not working, can we just take time out today and then tomorrow we'll work twice as hard because that's what we do.
Yeah.
We're not looking for an opportunity to slack off. What we're looking for is a way of tailoring how we work so that it brings out the best in everyone. And I don't think it matters whether you're male or female. We all need to be able to have flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And flex really is the way of the future, Tanya, as well. The way that we've got all these mandates, obviously, about returning to work and all that kind of thing. But historically, it's shown us that we can get our work done in working a flexible nature. Everyone's had both male and female. We've all had a taste of it now. So flexibility can look like many different things in many different ways. But at the end of the day, we're getting our shit done. We're getting our work done. Mm. So I think we've got to pick up that flexibility element in relation to how people get their work done, how they're feeling, a whole lot of things, having more family time. I love the idea I don't have to get up and spend an hour and a half getting ready and going to work. And it's an hour and a half. I can be at my computer an hour and a half earlier if I want. I can get up a little bit early, go to the gym and still be at my computer, but I don't have to worry about that commute, 5 days a week like we were used to. Another conversation another day, but they all meld really well together.
Mm.
Yeah. And I was just going to add too that it's not about shining a light on women and I put in inverted commas, incompetence of women through this phase of life. It's about actually shining a light that men and women both go through very significant life stages and phases. And we need to be able to come together and recognize the differences that we experience so that we can coexist and support each other and actually harness the strengths and the benefits of both. We're so conditioned that it's got to be one way or the other. And if we're supporting women, it means that we're against men. Well, actually, no. It's very much about coexisting and harnessing the powers of both biologies that are out there and using that for the greater good of doing the work that we do. But also, we don't just go to work, we go to work to create impact in community, to create change, to make a better future for our children and the generations to come. And so harnessing that power of both of us is really critical to creating community and creating society.
I was just thinking that what a powerful workplace that would be. In coming together with all the things that you just said. My God, there's so many positive benefits. My mind's going bananas over what that looks like.
Well, and talking about perimenopause and all those things, I'd love to hear a bit about your own journeys and how you kind of discovered that's what it was and what that experience was actually like.
I might kick off, Nat. Tanya, when I was in my early 40s, I was a second time around with a young son. I've got 2 boys, and The thing that really eluded, I didn't know what was happening at the time, but I had these massive mood changes. And I would almost say that I was a crazy, scary woman to be around. It was pretty horrible. And I've never been like that in my life. And I knew something was up. And I was also getting, my periods were still regular, but I was getting heart palpitations. And my confidence started to take a bit of a dive, which I found, well, it was never me. I've always been quite a confident person. And I didn't quite know what's going on. And, obviously I'm an avid learner, just Nat and I both are. Read lots and all that kind of thing. Wasn't getting much from my doctors. And that was in about when I was 42, 43. And then fast forward probably another 8 years and had the ebbs and flows. Sometimes I feel fine and sometimes I didn't. And then started to get the irregularity of a cycle. And I thought, yeah, this is definitely, something's going on. And obviously came to realize that it was perimenopause, because I did start looking at cycle tracking at that time, but felt I've come late to this because there was that irregularity there. But use the benefit of cycle tracking to lean in, as I mentioned before, how I was feeling through that time, day by day. And it's very powerful to be able to do that. And I would really encourage every woman day by day to lean into how they're feeling. And then definitely through lockdown here in Melbourne in 2020, started to experience some different symptoms. And look, was it the lockdown? I'm not really sure. I think perhaps now looking back, it was just the coinciding of, where I was in my life and my age and all that kind of thing. And just started to do something about it once I thought, oh my God, this is what it really is. But came to that conclusion pretty much myself. Did go to the doctors. Heart palpitations wasn't talked about as a sign of perimenopause. Was given the option to go on antidepressants. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. There's got to be something else. I really looked at my lifestyle and it was pretty good, but tightened up even more. And that really, I think that probably is what got me through a lot of the time. And I've since gone on some MHT to support me as I'm coming out to the other end of menopause. And that's been really helpful. But that, that desire to learn what's going on with my body and listening to the whispers was something that really held me in good stead to where I am today.
Mm.
Great story, Lise. And I'm actually at the other end, the beginning. So I'm 42. And it's funny, I remember when I turned 40 and thinking, oh, there's no difference going on here. And obviously we'd been doing the work. And part of what Lise and I have always wanted to do, and guess because we're at different life phases, different ages, was educating women before they came into perimenopause. And I've absolutely embraced all of that coming into my early 40s in cycle tracking and connecting to my body and understanding the ebbs and flows. But it was probably 41 that I started to just feel some changes. And I actually probably can't even explain what the changes were, but I just remember feeling a little bit different in a way. And then it was probably late last year. So I hadn't quite turned 42 yet. And I started experiencing some cycle changes. I've always been very bang on, usually 26 days with my cycle. And I remember having a cycle where I was 12 days late. And I thought, all right, there could be some changes are happening, or I'm pregnant. Oh my God, I don't even want to think about the latter, but we'll just roll with it. But I didn't have that panic because, again, I've had the knowledge, and I feel very grateful that I've come into this space to have that knowledge. So now when I have ebbs and flows in my cycle, like my last cycle was 4 days early and I was in Bali of all things. And again, I often talk about through cycle tracking that my period just comes and goes without batting an eyelid. Since cycle tracking, I don't experience symptoms or PMS so much. It's just, I just know what's happening. I know my lower energy times. I know if my mood changes a little bit, I know why that's happening, and I just ride through it. But it's definitely been those cycle changes. And then a couple of months ago, I had my first night sweat. And I woke up like I had had a shower. And my husband woke up. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm absolutely saturated from head to toe. And again, it was just, okay, we'll get on with it. We'll, dry myself, clean myself up, etc. And so for me, in my early stages, or early perimenopause, it's just those subtle changes that I'm starting to experience, but feeling comfortable in what's happening to me.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing is as much as we can educate people, not just when they're in it, but beforehand. So it's not this horrifying, traumatic thing of like, oh my God, I've got early dementia or there's something wrong with me, particularly if they are getting dismissed from their medical practitioner, is that they need to know that, okay, yes, they may not actually have all the answers when it comes to this. And so how do I actually find out what I need to know? It's a big task. Like there's, 80,000 women every year in Australia going into that journey. That's a lot of people that we're looking to educate and try and support.
Absolutely. And again, it's just coming back into your body. I had a blood test not so long ago, and one of the tests was looking at my progesterone and estradiol. And the doctor just came back and said, they're all perfect, all good. And I hadn't specifically asked about perimenopause or menopause because I'm not having troublesome symptoms, but it was just, he said, oh, we'll just test it, but it's okay. But again, we know that depending on when you have that blood test, it's not conclusive whether you are or you're not. So again, it's just knowing your body and feeling into those whispers and exploring what those changes are, and not being alarmed by those changes is really critical.
Yeah.
And the reason we probably keep bringing up about listening to your body and being aware and all that kind of stuff is that women are busy, whether they've got a family or they haven't got a family. They tend to put everyone's needs before their own, and they will just push those whispers or feelings aside. So if there's one thing that your listeners get from this conversation today is don't ignore how you're feeling and what's coming in and what your gut's telling you. You can often have a much better outcome if you're just leaning into it at that point, rather than the point where we talk about them screaming at you. Those whispers start to scream, and it's not pretty. We've worked with clients where that's happened, and it just takes a longer time to get back to where you want to get to. It's just little bits rather than big steps is the way to go.
And on that point, it'd be really great to hear a bit more about the work that you both are doing.
Yes, where do we start? My husband often jokes, he's like, I don't know how much you do, or how do we even explain what you do, because you do so much. And that's probably a challenge for Lisa and I, because we are so passionate about what we do. But essentially as a package, so we go into workplaces and educate workplaces and businesses about this phase of life. We offer that education support as well for leaders in the business around how to create culture, how to have those courageous conversations, and then also encouraging them to think about existing wellbeing initiatives as well, and looking at how do you offer more that lifestyle support. So educating the differences around the lifestyle and wellbeing education that they might be providing in the workplace, right through to coaching. So we coach individual women around that lifestyle support again, and a lot of the time we find it's giving that base level education around not just the what of menopause but the why. I think that's a really important piece that we just don't talk enough about, the why. And then again, looking at the lifestyle medicine, so looking at their nutrition, their sleep, their movement, the stress, spiritual health, all the different things that they could be looking at, and essentially coaching them through that behavior change and creating those positive habits that's going to support them around how they want their life to look like, not just today and in the future. Plus then also a big part of what we do is that community piece, and we've got an online community called Let's Talk, which is about trying to bring women together to have those conversations that perhaps they can't have outside in other forums. It's about really encouraging that connection, but giving them the confidence to then hopefully go out in their workplace and in family and friend networks to start having those conversations.
And we've also got our podcast, Perimenopause Power, where we drop a session pretty much every week, and sometimes it's Nat and I talking, and sometimes we have guests such as yourself, Tanya, that come on, and we're coming up to 3 years with that. I can't quite believe that we've almost been doing it for 3 years. So yeah,
it's a huge effort.
Yeah, tell us about it.
particularly consistently and weekly. And I think the interesting part of that is that there are just so many stories that can be shared and so many insights that you can get. It's not just here's the 5 things and you're done. It is actually complex. Everyone's different. And so having an opportunity to explore those stories with different people means that we all get an understanding that things can be quite different, but what might that look like?
Yeah, definitely spot on.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Today, we've been yarning with Natalie Moore and Lisa Saunders, the founders of Own Your Health Collective, and together they hold extensive credentials and share dedication to holistic health, well-being, life phase education, and workplace support, as we've just been hearing. Driven by their wealth of experience and expertise, their primary objective is to empower women to embrace their unique physiology, enabling them to unlock their highest potential and experience enhanced confidence, energy, and overall health. Recognizing the profound impact of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness on individuals' lives, Lisa and Natalie firmly believe that prioritizing these aspects in line with lifestyle medicine principles leads to lasting health, well-being, and happiness across all our phases of life. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you for having us, Tanya.
Thank you so much. It's been great.